The wind howled like metal tearing, its icy fingers clawing through the thin fabric of Ria's shelter. The makeshift tent, cobbled together from debris and scraps, trembled with each gust. Outside, the endless white stretched to the horizon, broken only by jagged formations of ice that caught the dim light of twin moons. In this frozen wasteland, on the war-torn frontier planet, silence reigned supreme, save for the low, threatening hum of distant storm generators and Ria's own ragged breathing. She hunched lower, cradling the small bundle against her chest. Her pale, frost-cracked skin glowed faintly with the blue-green luminescence of her veins, a biological adaptation that had once served her species well in the dark caverns of their homeworld. Now, it only made her easier to track, a liability. She adjusted her tattered hood, ensuring it covered the telltale glow at her throat. "Kyle," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm. "Stay with me, little one." The child in her arms gave no response. His small chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular patterns, each breath a battle against the cold that sought to claim him. His skin, normally iridescent with the same bioluminescence as his mother's, had dimmed to a dull gray. The fever of hypothermia had taken hold hours ago, and now, even that was fading as his tiny body surrendered to the inevitable. Ria pressed her forehead against his, feeling the chill of his skin against hers. She had done everything, exhausted every resource, pushed beyond her own limits of endurance. For 3 days, she had carried him through the blizzard after their transport crashed, searching for the rumored settlement that might have offered sanctuary. 3 days of dwindling supplies and growing desperation, only to find herself lost in an endless sea of white. A tear slipped down her cheek, freezing before it could fall. She had fled with Kale when the militia came for her kind, branded as hostiles in a conflict they had never chosen. They had survived the initial purge, the desperate flight off-world, even the crash landing on this desolate frontier planet. But now, in this moment, all her fierce maternal determination seemed futile against the simple, implacable reality of cold. Kale's breathing stuttered, then slowed further. "No," Ria murmured, adjusting his thin blanket, knowing it was not enough. Never enough. "No, my heart. Stay." She began to rock him gently, an instinctive motion as old as motherhood itself. Her four-fingered hand, with its double-jointed knuckles, stroked his face with infinite tenderness. When his eyelids fluttered, revealing pupils that dilated vertically in his species, Ria made her decision. If these were to be his final moments, she would fill them with love, not fear. Not the harsh sound of the wind or the emptiness of this alien place. She would give him something to carry into the darkness. She began to sing. The melody rose from deep in her chest, a sound unlike any human voice could produce, resonant with subharmonics that vibrated the very air around them. The lullaby was ancient, passed down through generations of her kind. It spoke of warm waters and twin suns, of safety, and the eternal bond between mother and child. The words themselves were untranslatable to other species, carrying meanings beyond simple vocabulary, impressions of color, sensation, belonging. One last song for her dying baby. Ria closed her eyes, pouring every fragment of love into the melody, her voice cracking with emotion yet never faltering. She sang of home, though home was now lost to them both. She sang of life, though life was slipping away before her eyes. She sang because it was all she had left to give. And then, through the howling of the blizzard, came a sound that did not belong. Footsteps, crunching through ice and snow. Ria's song died in her throat. Her body tensed, ready to flee or fight, though she had little strength for either. She clutched Kyle tighter, her luminescence flaring briefly with fear, a primal response she could not control. The tent flap moved. A figure loomed in the opening, broad-shouldered and heavily bundled against the cold, human Male. Ice crusted his beard and the fur-lined hood of his parka. In one gloved hand, he carried something that glowed orange. Rhea hissed, her back pressing against the far side of the shelter, her free hand extending claws that had evolved for climbing, but would serve as weapons if needed. "Easy," the human said, his voice low and measured. He remained perfectly still, making no move to enter further. "I heard singing." Rhea said nothing. Her species could understand most human languages, an evolutionary quirk of their highly adaptable neural pathways. But speaking, it was more difficult, requiring a different vocal structure than they possessed. The human slowly crouched, still maintaining his distance. His eyes, Rhea noticed, were a weathered blue, like ice with depth beneath it, not the flat, merciless gaze she had come to expect from his kind. "Your child is sick," he stated, not a question but an observation. Rhea glanced down at Kale, whose breathing had grown so faint it was nearly imperceptible. The desperation of their situation overrode her fear. She nodded once, a sharp movement. The human held out the orange glowing object. "Heat pack, military grade, and I have a shelter, about 2 miles from here. Medical supplies." Rhea stared at the heat pack, then at the human's face, searching for deception. Trust had become a luxury she could no longer afford, not after everything she had witnessed, everything she had suffered at the hands of both humans and her own kind. But Kale's life hung by a thread, and this stranger offered the one thing she had run out of: hope. "Why?" she managed, the word awkward and guttural in her mouth. The human's expression remained steady. "Because it's 20 below and dropping. Because no one should die out here, especially not a child." He paused, then added more quietly, "Because I've seen enough death." He extended the heat pack further. "My name is Davis." Rhea hesitated for one more heartbeat, then reached for the pack with trembling fingers. The warmth was immediate, radiating through her numb hand. She pressed it gently against Kale's chest, watching his face for any response. "Can you walk?" Davis asked. Rhea nodded, though in truth she wasn't certain. Days without proper food or rest had taken their toll. But for Kale, she would find strength where none remained. "Then we need to move now," Davis said, glancing at the darkening sky. "Storm's getting worse. Follow me." He backed out of the tent, giving her space. Rhea gathered Kale close, wrapping the tattered blanket more securely around him, with the heat pack nestled against his core. She took a deep breath, steeling herself, then emerged into the biting wind. Davis waited a few paces away, respectful of her wariness. He pointed toward a barely visible ridge in the distance. "That way. Stay close." And so they began their journey through the blizzard, the human breaking trail, the alien mother following with her precious burden. Each step was an act of will for Rhea. Her legs leaden with exhaustion, her lungs burning with the frigid air. But the small weight in her arms drove her forward. The storm intensified around them, visibility dropping to mere feet. Davis became little more than a dark silhouette ahead, occasionally turning to ensure she still followed. Once, when Rhea stumbled, he moved as if to help her, but stopped when she flinched away. He simply waited until she regained her footing, then continued. Time lost meaning in the white void of the blizzard. It might have been minutes or hours when Davis finally raised a hand, pointing. "There!" Through the swirling snow, Rhea made out the angular shape of a structure, a cabin constructed of dark timber and metal, partially buried in a snowdrift for insulation. Relief surged through her, but she tempered it with caution. Safety was a relative concept in her experience. Davis moved ahead, clearing the doorway of snow with quick, efficient movements. He pushed the door open, then stepped aside. "Go in. I'll secure the perimeter." Rhea hesitated, then ducked inside, her eyes rapidly adjusting to the dimness. The cabin was Spartan but functional. A single room with a metal stove in one corner, a narrow cot against one wall, storage crates stacked neatly, and a table with 2 chairs. Most importantly, it was shelter from the wind. She moved toward the stove, noticing it held only the faintest warmth, nearly out of fuel. She glanced back at the doorway where Davis was now entering, shaking snow from his parka. "Stove's almost cold," he said, noting her position. "Got wood stacked by the west wall. I'll get it going." He moved with the efficiency of long practice, feeding the stove with small pieces of kindling, then larger logs. Within minutes, the fire caught, and the first waves of genuine warmth began to radiate outward. Rhea remained standing, still cradling Cale, unwilling to lower her guard entirely despite her exhaustion. Davis seemed to understand. He gestured to the cot. "Sit. You're dead on your feet. I've got medical supplies in that crate." He moved to the indicated storage container, giving Rhea a wide berth. She sank onto the edge of the cot, finally allowing herself to check Cale properly in the improved light. What she saw made her heart constrict. His skin was alarmingly pale, the glow of his veins barely visible. Davis returned with a metal case, which he placed on the floor before backing away. Oxygen injector in there, nutrient solution, thermal regulators. Rhea looked from the case to Davis, surprise momentarily overriding her caution. Such supplies were military grade, not the sort of thing a frontier hunter would typically possess. Davis caught her expression and shrugged. "Former medic, old habits." This explained his calm efficiency, his careful movements. Rhea reached for the case, flipping it open to reveal neatly organized supplies. The oxygen injector was designed for human physiology, but she knew enough about adaptive medicine to make it work for Cale. She quickly prepared the device, her fingers moving with desperate speed. "May I help?" Davis asked quietly. Rhea froze, then slowly shook her head. She couldn't yet bridge that gap, couldn't allow a stranger, a human, to touch her child, no matter the circumstances. Davis nodded, accepting her decision without offense. "I'll make something warm to drink, then—" He moved to another crate, extracting packets of what appeared to be dried rations. As Rhea administered the oxygen treatment to Cale, she kept one eye on Davis's movements, noting how he deliberately kept his hands visible, his actions transparent. The oxygen injector hissed softly as it delivered its life-giving contents directly into Cale's bloodstream. For several agonizing moments, there was no response. Then, like a miracle, Cale's chest rose in a deeper breath. His eyelids fluttered, and a small sound escaped him, not quite a cry, but a definite sign of life. "Kyle," Rhea whispered, relief flooding through her. She pressed her forehead to his, feeling the first hint of warmth returning to his skin. Across the room, Davis watched silently, a cup of steaming liquid in his hand. His expression remained carefully neutral, but something in his eyes, a softness, perhaps, suggested he understood the significance of the moment. "Nutrient broth," he said eventually, setting the cup on the floor within Rhea's reach, before retreating again. "When you're ready." Rhea nodded her thanks, though she made no move toward the broth yet. She continued to monitor Cale, applying a thermal regulator pad to his back, watching as color slowly returned to his face. His breathing, while still shallow, had stabilized. Outside, the blizzard continued to rage, rattling the cabin's windows and howling around its corners. But inside, a fragile bubble of safety had formed. Temporary, perhaps, but real, nonetheless. As the hours passed, Cale's condition gradually improved. He drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally opening his eyes to look at his mother with unfocused recognition. Each time, Rhea sang softly to him, no longer the desperate farewell of before, but gentle reassurances. Davis maintained his distance, occupying himself with small tasks, checking the perimeter, organizing supplies, keeping the fire fed. He spoke little, respecting the invisible boundary Rhea had established. When night fell fully, he unrolled a sleeping mat on the floor, positioning himself by the door. "You should rest," he told Rhea. "I'll keep watch." Rhea, despite her exhaustion, shook her head. She would not sleep, not yet. Not with a stranger present, regardless of his apparent benevolence. Davis seemed to understand. "I won't move from this spot," he assured her. "You have my word." Words meant little to Rhea after all she had endured. But the practical reality of their situation left her few options. She arranged herself on the cot, Cale securely in her arms, positioned so she could see both her child and Davis at all times. The night passed in uneasy vigilance. Each time Rhea's eyes began to drift closed, she forced them open again, fighting against the pull of exhaustion. Davis remained true to his word, staying by the door, occasionally rising only to tend the fire. By morning, Rhea's vision was blurred with fatigue, but Kyle's condition had noticeably improved, his breathing deeper, the glow of his veins stronger. Davis stirred from his position, moving slowly, as if aware of Rhea's watchfulness. "Storms let up some," he observed, glancing toward the window, where gray light filtered through. "How's the little one?" "Better," Rhea managed, the human word awkward but clear. Davis nodded, something like relief flickering across his weathered features. "Good, that's good." He busied himself preparing more of the nutrient broth. "You should eat too. Need your strength." Rhea accepted the cup he offered, more willing now that a night had passed without incident. The broth was bland but warming, and she realized how desperately her body needed sustenance. She drank it quickly, then turned her attention to coaxing Cale to take small sips. "What's his name?" Davis asked, keeping his distance but watching with interest. Rhea hesitated, then answered softly, "Cale." Davis nodded. "Strong name." He paused, then added, "You've come a long way." It wasn't a question, but Rhea understood he was seeking information. She evaluated what to share, weighing risk against the debt she now owed this human for her child's life. "Escaped," she said simply. "Purge of my kind. 3 sectors away." Davis's expression darkened. "The Meridian conflict? Heard about that. Didn't hear about purges, though." "Not reported," Rhea replied, bitterness edging her voice. "Classified." Understanding dawned in Davis's eyes. "You were on the wrong side of the line they drew." Rhea nodded. The line had been arbitrary, a political designation that suddenly rendered her people combatants in a war they had never chosen. Those who could had fled. Many had not been so fortunate. "Been out here 2 years, Davis offered after a moment. "Left when things started going bad. Figured the frontier was safer than picking sides." He turned away, checking supplies in one of the crates. "Should be safe here for a while. No patrols this far out, especially in winter." Rhea wasn't so certain. The militia hunting her kind had proven remarkably persistent, with tracking technology specifically calibrated to detect their biological signatures. But for now, at least, the storm would mask their presence. As if reading her thoughts, Davis added, "Got some countermeasures set up around the perimeter. Early warning system. Not foolproof, but better than nothing." This confirmed Rhea's suspicion that Davis was more than a simple frontier hunter. The equipment in the cabin, the medical supplies, his tactical awareness, all pointed to military training. Yet he had chosen isolation over continued service. She wondered what had driven him to this remote outpost, what ghosts he might be running from. The day passed in a strange, cautious routine. Davis maintained his respectful distance, occupying himself with tasks that kept the cabin functioning, checking water stores, repairing a section of wall where wind had worked its way through, taking inventory of their supplies. Rhea focused on Cale, administering medicine when needed, encouraging him to drink, monitoring his improving vital signs. By evening, Kyle was alert enough to sit up, his eyes tracking movements around the cabin with growing curiosity. When Davis approached to stoke the fire, Kyle watched him with interest rather than fear. "Hello there," Davis said softly. Noticing the child's attention, he remained crouched by the stove, making no move to come closer. Kyle tilted his head, studying the human with the unabashed directness of the very young. After a moment, he made a chirping sound, a greeting in his native communication. Davis smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "Hello to you too, little man." The interaction, brief as it was, created a subtle shift in the cabin's atmosphere. Some of the tension eased from Rhea's shoulders as she observed Kale's comfort. Children, she knew, often sensed things adults could not, dangers and safeties alike. That night, Rhea allowed herself short periods of true sleep, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion. Each time she woke, she found Davis in the same position by the door, vigilant and unchanging. Once, she caught him watching Kale with an expression that surprised her, something like longing, quickly masked when he noticed her awareness. The storm outside had diminished to occasional gusts, and in the relative quiet, other sounds became more noticeable. It was during one such lull that Davis suddenly tensed, his head turning toward the window. "What is it?" Rhea asked, immediately alert. Davis raised a hand for silence, his entire posture changing, from caretaker to soldier in an instant. He moved to the window, staying carefully to one side as he peered out. "Something tripped the perimeter sensor," he said, his voice low. "Could be wildlife. Could be not." Rhea clutched Kale closer, her heart rate accelerating. She knew better than to hope for wildlife. The militia had found them. Davis moved with swift efficiency, retrieving a rifle from beneath his sleeping mat, a weapon he had kept concealed until now. He checked it quickly, then reached into a storage crate for what appeared to be small, metallic discs. "Proximity charges," he explained, noting Rhea's questioning look. "Non-lethal, but they'll buy us time if needed." He pulled on his parka. "Stay inside. Keep away from the windows." Before Rhea could protest, he slipped out the door, moving low and fast. She immediately gathered Kale and retreated to the corner furthest from the door and windows, placing her body between her child and any potential threat. Minutes crawled by, each one stretching Rhea's nerves tighter. She strained to hear any sound over Kale's soft breathing and the occasional creak of the cabin settling. Then came a muffled thump from somewhere outside, followed by a flash of light that briefly illuminated the window. One of the proximity charges. Moments later, the cabin door burst open, and Davis reappeared, snow coating his parka, his expression grim. "2 hunters, militia. They're down for now, but there'll be more." Rhea's worst fears confirmed. She rose to her feet, Kale secured in her arms. "We must go." Davis shook his head. "No place to go in this. Temperatures dropping again. Another front moving in." He secured the door, then moved to the window, checking the perimeter. "Those 2 weren't regular patrol. They're trackers, following your signature." Rhea knew what that meant. The hunters had technology specifically designed to detect her species' unique biological emissions. Their luminescent veins, the particular radiation pattern of their cellular structure. Distance and weather could mask it temporarily, but they would be found eventually. "They have our signal now," she said, anxiety sharpening her pronunciation. "More will come." "Yes," Davis agreed grimly. "So we prepare." He moved with purpose around the cabin, gathering supplies, repositioning furniture to create makeshift barriers. "Got about 2 hours before their backup arrives, based on standard militia protocols. Enough time to set up a defense." Rhea watched him, conflicted. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to take Kyle, and disappear into the storm. But logic told her that was certain death, for both of them. Cale was recovering but still weak, and the temperature outside was lethal. Their only chance was to stand and fight, with a human they barely knew. "Why help us?" she asked abruptly, needing to understand. "Risk your life? For strangers?" Davis paused in his preparations, something complicated crossing his face. "I told you, seen enough death." He turned away, continuing his work, but then added quietly, "Had a family once, on Meridian Colony, before the conflict." The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Davis, too, had lost everything to the same war that had driven Rhea from her home. "I'm sorry," she said, the human phrase feeling strange on her tongue. Davis nodded once, accepting her words without looking up. "Help me move this table." Makes a good barricade by the east window. They worked together in tense silence, preparing the cabin for the coming assault. Davis showed Rhea how to set the remaining proximity charges, taught her the basic operation of a sidearm he had kept in reserve. She listened intently, absorbing the knowledge with the fierce determination of a mother protecting her young. Cale, sensing the gravity of the situation despite his young age, remained unusually quiet, watching the preparations with solemn eyes. When Rhea settled him in a protected corner, nestled in a makeshift shelter created from the cot mattress and metal storage containers, he reached for her face, his small fingers tracing the luminescent veins at her temple. "Safe," she assured him in their native tongue. "Mother keeps you safe." Davis approached, carrying a small device that resembled a disc with a blinking center. "Biomask," he explained. "Military issue. Dampens organic signatures. Not perfect, but it might confuse their trackers." He held it out to Rhea. "For the little one." Rhea took the device, recognizing its value. Such technology was rare and highly restricted. That Davis possessed it, and was willing to part with it, spoke volumes. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate for the gesture. Davis merely nodded, turning back to his preparations. Rhea carefully attached the biomask to Cale's blanket, positioning it near enough to have effect without risking contact with his sensitive skin. Outside, the wind had picked up again, howling around the cabin's corners. The sound would mask approach, making their defense that much more difficult. Davis seemed to recognize this, his movements becoming more urgent as he positioned the last of his traps. "Time's almost up," he said, checking the rifle once more. "They'll come from the north, most likely, using the ridge for cover." Rhea nodded, taking position by one of the windows, the unfamiliar weight of the sidearm heavy in her hand. She had never been a warrior. Her people were explorers and scholars by nature, but the will to protect Cale transcended her peaceful heritage. "Remember," Davis said, his voice steady. "Wait for my signal. Don't waste shots. Aim low. Their armor is weakest at the joints." The minutes ticked by in tense silence. Outside, the storm intensified, white particles driving horizontally past the windows. Visibility dropped to near zero, a mixed blessing. The storm would hinder their attackers but also mask their approach. Cale made a soft sound from his sheltered corner, drawing Rhea's attention. His eyes were wide, sensing her fear despite her attempts to hide it. She managed a reassuring smile, willing confidence into her expression. The first indication of attack came not as a sound, but as a sudden absence. The wind died completely, an unnatural stillness falling over the landscape. Davis tensed, raising a hand in warning. "Storm tech," he whispered. "They're controlling the weather. Get ready." Moments later, the first proximity charge detonated with a concussive thump that shook the cabin's walls. A flash of blue-white light illuminated the snow outside, revealing the dark silhouette of an armored figure thrown backward by the blast. "One down," Davis murmured, but there was no triumph in his voice. "More coming." The attack came in coordinated waves, two figures approaching from the north, while a third provided covering fire from the ridge. The hunters moved with the confidence of superior technology and numbers, their armor gleaming dully in the sporadic light of detonating charges. Davis fired with precision, his shots targeting vulnerable points in the hunter's armor. Rhea, following his example, aimed carefully at the joints of an approaching figure. Her shot connected, eliciting a howl of pain that carried eerily across the snow. For several minutes, the firefight continued in a chaotic exchange. The cabin's walls shuddered under the impact of the hunter's weapons, energy pulses that left smoking holes in the timber. Davis and Rhea returned fire from behind their makeshift barricades, buying precious seconds, minutes. "Running low on charges," Davis called, ejecting a spent magazine from his rifle. "They're going to rush us soon." As if in response to his prediction, a new sound cut through the battle, the heavy, mechanical whine of servos and hydraulics. Rhea felt her blood run cold. She knew that sound. "Siege mech," she gasped. Davis's expression hardened. "How many?" "One, but enough." The ground trembled as the mech approached, a towering, spider-legged apparatus designed for frontline combat. Its central body housed a pilot protected by layers of armor, while its articulated limbs carried an array of weapons. It was a killing machine, built for a single purpose. "We need a new plan," Davis said grimly, peering through a gap in the barricade. The mech had appeared at the edge of visibility, its massive form moving with surprising grace across the snow. "No plan against that," Rhea replied, despair threatening to overwhelm her. She had seen what mechs could do to reinforce structures, let alone a wooden cabin. Davis was silent for a moment, his eyes darting around the cabin as if searching for inspiration. Then his gaze settled on a particular crate in the corner, one he had not opened during their preparations. "Maybe," he said, a strange note entering his voice. "Maybe there is." He moved to the crate, prying it open to reveal several cylindrical objects nestled in protective foam. Rhea recognized them immediately. Fuel cells, highly volatile, potentially devastating in the right application. "You thinking," she began, but was interrupted by a thunderous impact as one of the mech's weapons found its mark. The cabin's eastern wall splintered, sending shards of wood flying. Rhea threw herself over Cale, shielding him with her body. Davis was already in motion, gathering the fuel cells. "We need to draw it closer. Make it commit." Rhea understood the strategy instantly, and its terrible risk. "Trap? Using cabin as bait?" Davis nodded grimly. "Exactly. But we need to be outside to set it." He looked at Cale, then back to Rhea. "You stay with him. I'll do it." "No," Rhea said firmly, rising to her feet. "I fight too." Another impact rocked the cabin, this one closer to the core structure. The mech was systematically targeting support points, working to collapse the building around them. Davis studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but we need to move fast." He handed her two of the fuel cells. "Place these on the north side, 10 feet apart. I'll take the west." Rhea hesitated, looking at Cale in his protected corner. The child watched her with those solemn eyes, understanding more than his age should allow. "I return," she promised him in their language. Then, switching to the human tongue for Davis's benefit, she added, "Make it fast." They moved with desperate efficiency, using the continuing barrage from the mech as cover for their preparations. Rhea slipped out a side window, keeping low as she positioned the fuel cells according to Davis's instructions. The snow bit into her skin, her breath crystallizing in the frigid air, but adrenaline kept her moving. From her position, she could see the mech more clearly, a nightmare of metal and weaponry, its legs creating deep impressions in the snow as it methodically circled the cabin. The pilot, visible through a reinforced viewport, wore the distinctive helmet of the militia's elite hunters. Davis emerged from the opposite side of the cabin, signaling that his cells were in place. Now came the most dangerous part of the plan. "We need to draw it to the center," he called, his voice barely audible over the mech's mechanical whine. "Between all the cells." Rhea nodded, understanding. One of them would need to act as bait, luring the mech into position while the other triggered the detonation. A suicide mission, essentially. Before she could volunteer, Davis was already moving, darting from cover to fire directly at the mech's viewport. The pilot reacted predictably, turning the machine's full attention toward this new threat. "Get to Kale!" Davis shouted, continuing to fire as he backed toward the position they needed. "Be ready to run when it blows." Rhea hesitated, torn between the urgent need to protect her child and the growing certainty that Davis was sacrificing himself. The mech advanced relentlessly, weapons charging for a killing shot. In that moment, Rhea made her decision, darting from cover. She fired her sidearm at the mech's rear leg joint, a vulnerable point she had noted earlier. The shot connected, causing the leg to buckle momentarily. The pilot's attention divided. The mech swiveled, now caught between two targets. Davis seized the opportunity, firing again, drawing the mech further into the kill zone. Rhea circled from the opposite direction, maintaining the divided attention. Between them, they maneuvered the massive machine exactly where they needed it. "Now!" Davis shouted, raising a small detonator. Rhea dove for cover as Davis triggered the explosives. The fuel cells detonated in a synchronized chain, creating a concentrated fireball that engulfed the mech. The concussive force threw Rhea backward, snow and debris raining down around her. For several heartbeats, the world consisted of nothing but noise and heat and the taste of ash. Then, gradually, sensory awareness returned. Rhea pushed herself up, ears ringing, vision blurred. Through the smoke and falling snow, she could make out the twisted wreckage of the mech, its legs splayed at unnatural angles, its central compartment breached. "Davis!" she called, struggling to her feet. "Davis!" No response came, fear clutching at her heart. Rhea scanned the devastation, searching for any sign of the human who had fought alongside her. She found him half buried in snow several yards from the blast site, unmoving. Rushing to his side, she cleared the snow from his face. Blood streaked from a gash on his forehead, and one arm lay at an unnatural angle. But he was breathing, shallow, ragged breaths that fogged the frigid air. "Alive!" Rhea breathed, relief washing through her. "You alive!" She glanced toward the cabin, now partially collapsed from the force of the explosion. Kale was still inside, in his protected corner. She needed to get to him, to ensure he was safe. But she couldn't leave Davis exposed to the elements. Making a quick decision, Rhea hoisted the unconscious human over her shoulder, staggering slightly under his weight. Her species possessed greater strength than their slender frames suggested, an evolutionary adaptation to their original high-gravity homeworld. Still, Davis was a substantial burden, especially in her exhausted state. She made her way to the cabin, picking through the debris. The structure had held better than expected. One section remained largely intact, including, thankfully, the corner where Kale had been sheltered. "Kale!" she called, setting Davis down carefully inside what remained of the doorway. A small sound answered her, a frightened chirp from beneath the overturned cot. Rhea rushed to the source, lifting the heavy frame with desperate strength. Kale looked up at her, eyes wide but unharmed, the biomask still secured to his blanket. "Safe," she soothed, gathering him into her arms. "Safe now." With Kale secure, Rhea turned her attention back to Davis. His condition was deteriorating, the cold seeping into his injuries. Shock setting in. She needed to act quickly, laying Kale in a sheltered spot. She set about salvaging what she could from the cabin's remains. The stove had miraculously survived, though it had tipped onto its side. Rhea righted it, checking that the chimney pipe remained functional. She gathered unburned wood from the wreckage, stacking it beside the stove. Next, she located the medical supplies, many of which had scattered in the explosion. Working methodically, she cleared a space in the most intact corner of the cabin, dragging Davis's unconscious form to this makeshift shelter. She bandaged his head wound with torn cloth, splinted his broken arm with pieces of wood, and covered him with every blanket she could find. The stove provided meager heat, but it was enough to keep the worst of the cold at bay. Rhea positioned Cale close to the warmth, then settled herself between the two wounded figures, her child and the human who had risked everything for them. As night fell, the temperature plummeted further. Rhea maintained vigilance, tending the fire, checking Davis's condition, soothing Cale when he whimpered. The wreckage of the mech smoldered in the distance, a dark hulk against the snow. It was near midnight when Davis finally stirred, a groan escaping his lips as consciousness brought awareness of pain. Rhea moved to his side immediately, offering water from a salvaged canteen. "Easy," she murmured, unconsciously echoing his first words to her. "Hurt bad." Davis's eyes focused slowly, recognition dawning. "Rhea," he managed, voice rough. "Cale." "Safe," she assured him, gesturing to where the child slept nearby. "Both safe." Relief washed over Davis's features, followed by a grimace of pain as he tried to move. "The mech?" "Destroyed. Pilot dead." Davis processed this information, then asked, "Others?" Rhea shook her head. "No sign. Storm covers tracks for now." This was true, but both knew it was temporary. The militia would send more hunters when these failed to report back. But for the moment, at least, they had bought themselves time. "Need to move," Davis said, attempting to sit up despite his injuries. "Not safe here." Rhea placed a restraining hand on his shoulder. "Not yet. You heal first. Then move." Davis looked as if he might argue, but exhaustion and pain won out. He sank back, conceding to her logic. 2 days, he said. "Then we go. I know a place. Further north. Old mining outpost. Better defenses." Rhea nodded, accepting the plan. 2 days, she agreed. The night passed in uneasy calm. Rhea dozed in short intervals, always waking to check on both her charges. By morning, Davis's fever had spiked, his body fighting infection from his wounds. Rhea administered antibiotics from the salvaged medical supplies, then set about strengthening their temporary shelter. Using debris from the cabin and the insulating snow itself, she constructed a more substantial windbreak around the stove and their sleeping area. She salvaged food and water, organizing their remaining supplies with meticulous care. Every action was calculated for survival. Every decision weighed against their limited resources. Cale, showing remarkable resilience, began to explore the boundaries of their makeshift camp, his natural curiosity reasserting itself. He seemed particularly fascinated by Davis, watching the injured human with the intense focus of a child making sense of his world. When Davis's fever finally broke on the second day, Rhea allowed herself a moment of genuine relief. His recovery was far from complete, but the immediate danger had passed. She helped him sit up, supporting his weight as he took in their improved shelter. "Impressive," he commented, surveying her handiwork. Rhea acknowledged the compliment with a slight inclination of her head. "Necessary." Davis managed a weak smile. "Still impressive." His gaze shifted to Cale, who was occupied with a small mechanical part, salvaged from the wreckage, turning it over in his hands, examining it from all angles. "He's a smart one." "Yes," Rhea agreed, maternal pride evident in her voice. "Learns quick." As if aware of their attention, Cale looked up, meeting Davis's eyes. After a moment's consideration, the child rose unsteadily to his feet and toddled over, offering Davis the mechanical part he had been examining. Davis accepted the gift with appropriate solemnity. "Thank you," he said, his voice gentler than Rhea had yet heard it. Cale chirped in response, then reached out one small hand to touch Davis's splinted arm with careful curiosity. "Hurt," Rhea explained to her son in their language. "Be gentle." Cale nodded his understanding, then patted Davis's arm with exaggerated care before returning to his explorations. Davis watched him go, something complex flickering across his features. "How old is he?" "3 cycles," Rhea answered. "Young for journey." Davis nodded, understanding the implication. Under normal circumstances, no mother would subject a child so young to the hardships they had endured. Only desperation drove such choices. "My daughter was about that age," he said after a long moment, the words coming slowly. When the conflict reached Meridian, Rhea remained silent, recognizing the difficulty with which he shared this information. "I was deployed off-world," Davis continued, his gaze fixed on some distant point. "Military Medical Corps. When the attacks came, I couldn't get back in time." He paused, swallowing hard. "My wife, daughter, along with 3 million others." Rhea felt a surge of empathy so powerful it momentarily took her breath away. Her hand moved of its own accord, coming to rest lightly on Davis's uninjured arm, the first voluntary contact she had initiated between them. "I am sorry," she said, the human phrase no longer feeling foreign on her tongue. Davis covered her hand with his own, briefly, acknowledging the gesture. "After that, I couldn't stay in the service, couldn't follow orders from the same command that had failed to protect my family. So I deserted. Came out here. Figured I'd either find peace or punishment." His mouth twisted in a humorless smile. "Found neither. Really. Just existence." Rhea understood more than he knew. Her own losses were still raw. Friends, family, her entire community scattered or worse in the purge. "Existence," she agreed softly. "Until something worth more." Davis looked at her. Really looked, as if seeing beyond her alien features to the shared experience that united them. "Your son," he said. "He gave you that something." Rhea nodded. "Your something?" Davis considered the question, his gaze drifting to where Cale played. "Maybe," he said finally. "Maybe I just found it." The moment of connection, tentative as it was, marked a shift in their relationship. When they began preparations to move the following morning, there was a new efficiency to their cooperation, a mutual understanding that transcended words. Davis, though still weakened by his injuries, insisted on carrying his share of the supplies. Rhea, recognizing his need to contribute, allowed it while keeping a watchful eye on his condition. Cale, bundled securely against Rhea's chest, seemed to understand the gravity of their journey, remaining unusually quiet as they set out across the snow. The mining outpost Davis had mentioned lay 3 days' travel to the north, a journey made more difficult by the need to move cautiously and cover their tracks. The storm had passed, leaving a crystalline clarity to the air that made them vulnerable to aerial surveillance. They kept to ridgelines and forest patches where possible, avoiding open ground. Each night, they established a minimal camp, just enough shelter to survive, easily abandoned if necessary. Davis taught Rhea human techniques for fire making without smoke, for disguising their heat signature from thermal scanners. In return, Rhea shared methods from her people for finding water in seemingly barren landscapes, for predicting weather changes through subtle environmental cues. They spoke little during these exchanges, communication reduced to its most essential elements. Yet in this stripped-down interaction, a foundation of trust was being built, not the blind trust of desperation that had marked their initial encounter, but something more substantial, tested by fire and survival. On the 3rd day of their journey, as they crested a ridge overlooking a deep valley, Davis pointed to a cluster of structures nestled against the far slope. "There, the outpost." Rhea studied the distant buildings, noting their partially subterranean construction, a common design for withstanding the planet's harsh conditions. Abandoned? For 10 years at least, Davis confirmed. Company pulled out when the ore deposits were exhausted, but the infrastructure is solid. Power core still functional. Defense systems can be reactivated. He glanced at Rhea, a hint of uncertainty in his expression. Could be a home, for a while, at least. The word caught Rhea by surprise. Home. It had been so long since she had allowed herself to think in such terms, to consider anything beyond immediate survival. Home implied permanence, security, concepts that had become almost foreign. Worth trying, she said finally, adjusting Cale's position against her chest. The child had fallen asleep, his small body warm and trusting. They made their way down the ridge and across the valley floor, approaching the outpost from the west to minimize their visibility. As they drew closer, Rhea could see that the structures were more substantial than they had appeared from a distance. Reinforced metal and composite materials designed to withstand not only weather, but potential attacks from competing mining interests. Davis led them to a side entrance partially concealed by accumulated snow. Emergency access, he explained, brushing away the ice that had formed around the control panel. Should still work. After several attempts, the panel flickered to life, its screen casting a pale blue glow on Davis's face. He entered a sequence of codes, his expression intent. There was a moment of tense silence, then a grinding sound as ancient mechanisms activated. The door slid open with surprising smoothness, revealing a dark corridor beyond. "Welcome home," Davis said quietly, stepping inside. The outpost's interior was cold, but not frozen, suggesting some minimal power systems had remained operational despite the years of abandonment. Davis moved with purpose through the darkened corridors, occasionally stopping to activate lighting or access panels. Rhea followed, taking in every detail with the wariness of someone who had learned to expect danger at every turn. They eventually emerged into what had once been the outpost's operations center, a large room with banks of equipment, most of it dormant, but seemingly intact. Davis immediately went to the central console, bringing systems online one by one. "Life support first," he murmured, more to himself than to Rhea. "Then security, then communications, though that might be trickier." Rhea set Kyle down carefully on a cleared surface, allowing him to continue sleeping while she explored their new surroundings. The operations center connected to several other areas: living quarters, a medical bay, storage facilities. Everything showed signs of hasty abandonment. Personal items left behind, equipment in mid-repair, but no indication of violence or disaster. The company had simply moved on, leaving a fully functional facility in its wake. "Why abandoned?" she asked, returning to where Davis worked at the console. "Still useful." Davis glanced up from his task. "Economics. Cheaper to build new than maintain remote outposts once the primary resource is depleted. Corporate logic." There was a hint of bitterness in his tone. "Their waste, our gain." Systems came online progressively, bringing heat, light, and security to the outpost. By nightfall, they had established a comfortable base in what had been the facility's living quarters, a section designed for the comfort of human workers, with actual beds, functional plumbing, and a small but well-equipped kitchen area. Cale, now awake and exploring his new environment with boundless curiosity, seemed to sense the change in their circumstances. Gone was the constant tension of imminent threat, replaced by a cautious optimism. That night, for the first time since their meeting, both Rhea and Davis allowed themselves to truly rest. Rhea settled Cale in a makeshift bed constructed from cushions and blankets, singing softly to him as he drifted to sleep. The song was different now, no longer a desperate farewell, but a gentle promise of safety and continuity. Davis, seated nearby, listened with evident appreciation. "Beautiful," he commented when she finished. "What does it mean?" Ria considered how to translate concepts that existed beyond simple vocabulary. "Speaks of connection," she explained haltingly. "Between parent and child, between person and stars. All connected." Davis nodded, understanding more than she had expected. "Your people were explorers, weren't they? Before the conflict." "Yes," Ria confirmed, surprised by his knowledge. "Seekers of knowledge, new worlds." "I met some of your kind, years ago," Davis said. "On a scientific expedition. Brilliant minds, peaceful." His expression darkened. "Never understood why they were targeted in the purges. Made no sense." "Fear," Ria said simply. "Of difference." Davis acknowledged this with a grim nod. "The oldest enemy." They sat in companionable silence for a time, each lost in their own thoughts. Eventually, Davis rose, moving with the careful deliberation of someone still healing from significant injuries. "I'll check the perimeter systems once more, then get some rest," he said. "You should sleep while you can." Ria watched him go, noting the slight hitch in his gait, the way he favored his injured arm. Despite his strength and resilience, he remained vulnerable, as did she, as did Kale. They had found temporary safety, perhaps, but the galaxy that had made them refugees remained unchanged. Yet, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Ria allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something beyond mere survival. Days at the outpost fell into a pattern of recovery and reconstruction. Davis focused on restoring the facility systems to full functionality, particularly the defense grid and early warning network. Ria, drawing on knowledge from her previous life as a xenobiologist, cataloged the local flora and fauna, identifying potential food sources to supplement their limited supplies. Kale thrived in the stability of their new environment. His health fully recovered. His natural exuberance returned in full force. He explored every accessible corner of the outpost, collected specimens of strange plants and rocks, and began to mimic human words with surprising accuracy. "Home," he declared one morning, pointing to the living quarters they had claimed as their own. The word was clear, despite his alien vocal structure. Davis, who had been repairing a circuit panel nearby, looked up in surprise and evident delight. "That's right, little man. Home." Ria felt a complex emotion at hearing her son adopt this human concept so readily. Yet, she could not deny the truth of it. They had made this place their home, temporary though it might be. As weeks passed, the outpost transformed under their care. Davis restored power to additional sections, expanding their usable space. Ria established a small hydroponic system using equipment from the abandoned science lab, growing nutrient-rich vegetation adapted to the planet's harsh conditions. Together, they created a space that was not merely functional, but increasingly comfortable. Spring arrived with surprising swiftness on this frontier world. The endless snowfields began to recede, revealing patches of rocky ground beneath. Strange, hardy plants pushed through the thawing earth, pale, tentacle-like shoots that unfurled into surprisingly vibrant flowers. Kale was fascinated by this emergence of life. Each day, he insisted on venturing outside under careful supervision, cataloging new growth with the precision of a born scientist. Davis encouraged this curiosity, teaching him human names for colors and shapes, while Ria shared the knowledge of her people regarding ecological interconnection. On a particularly mild day, Davis took Kale to a nearby ridge, showing him how to set a simple trap for the small, rabbit-like creatures that had emerged from hibernation. The lesson was practical, a means of securing food, but it represented something more significant, the passing on of knowledge, of belonging. Ria, watching from a distance, felt a tightness in her chest that was not entirely painful. Kyle needed this. Needed more than one perspective. One set of skills. Needed a future beyond running and hiding. That evening, as they shared a meal by the warmth of the outpost's central heating system, Rhea made a decision. Setting down her utensils, she looked directly at Davis. "My name," she said carefully. "My true name is Arla." Davis looked up, clearly understanding the significance of this disclosure. True names held special importance in her culture, shared only with those considered family. "Arla," he repeated, pronouncing it with careful respect. "Thank you for telling me." She nodded once, acknowledging his understanding. "And you? Davis? What?" "Matthews," he supplied. "Davis Matthews, former medical officer, 7th Expeditionary Force." He paused, then added with a slight smile, "Current outpost engineer and rabbit trapper." This simple exchange, the sharing of names, of histories, marked another threshold crossed. They were no longer merely survivors thrown together by circumstance, but people with identities, with pasts, and potentially a future. That night, as Cale slept peacefully in his improvised bed, Arla and Davis sat together by the observation window, watching the twin moons rise over the distant mountains. The silence between them was comfortable now, no longer charged with suspicion or uncertainty. "Will they stop looking?" Davis asked eventually, giving voice to the question that had remained largely unspoken. "The militia." Arla considered this, weighing hope against realistic assessment. "Not officially," she said finally. "But resources spread thin. Many targets. Low priority now, perhaps." Davis nodded, accepting this pragmatic view. "We're as safe here as anywhere in this sector. Better defenses than most settlements." "Yes," Arla agreed. "And—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Not alone. Stronger together." Davis turned to look at her, his weathered face softened by the moonlight. "Yes," he said simply. "Stronger together." In that moment, something shifted between them, a recognition of the bond that had formed through shared danger and survival, through the care of a child, through the building of a home. Not romantic love, perhaps, but something equally profound, a family forged by choice rather than biology. As the days lengthened and the snow retreated further, life at the outpost settled into a new rhythm. Davis ventured farther afield, mapping the surrounding territory, identifying potential threats and resources. Arla expanded her hydroponics project, cultivating plants that provided both nutrition and medicinal benefits. Kyle grew stronger and more verbal, switching fluidly between his native language and the human words he absorbed with remarkable speed. They maintained vigilance, regular perimeter checks, monitoring of communication channels, preparation for swift evacuation if necessary. But increasingly, these precautions became routine rather than desperate measures. One evening, as the three of them sat outside the outpost entrance, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and purple, Cale pointed to a small green shoot pushing through the rocky soil. "Life," he declared proudly, using a word Arla had taught him. Then, looking from Arla to Davis and back again, he added in his developing human speech, "Family." Davis glanced at Arla, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, acknowledging the truth of it. They had become a family, unusual, perhaps, formed by circumstance rather than design, but a family nonetheless. "Yes," Davis said, resting a gentle hand on Cale's shoulder. "Family." Later that night, with Kyle asleep between them, under a canopy of unfamiliar stars, Arla allowed herself to fully believe in this new reality. They remained refugees in a hostile galaxy, their safety never entirely guaranteed. The conflict that had driven them from their homes continued to rage across distant systems. But here, in this moment, they had found something precious, a connection that transcended species and circumstance. One last song had become a beginning. Davis slept peacefully beside her, his breathing deep and even, his face relaxed in a way she had not seen before. Arla studied him, this human who had stepped through a blizzard and changed everything, who had offered warmth when all seemed lost, who had fought alongside her without question, who had become, against all probability, family. "Thank you," she whispered in her native tongue, the words carrying meanings beyond simple gratitude, acknowledgement of life preserved, of trust given and received, of a future reclaimed from despair. As if hearing her across the barrier of sleep and language, Davis smiled slightly. Beside him, Cale shifted in his dreams, one small hand reaching out to rest against Arla's arm, the other touching Davis's chest, connecting them even in unconsciousness. Arla closed her eyes, allowing sleep to claim her at last. Around them, the outpost hummed with restored systems, a shield against the wilderness. Above, the stars continued their ancient patterns, indifferent to the struggles of those who lived beneath their light. And within this small circle of warmth, a family slept, mother, child, and human father, safe for the first time.